Bring her to us.
The oil lamp had been burning for 3 hours, and Lyra hadn't moved. Maps spread across the table, hand-drawn on treated leather, detailed guard posts, and the precise angle of torchlight across the ceremonial platform at the peak of the Lunar Festival's second night. 8 months of intelligence, 18 months of planning, 20 years of preparation. All narrowed to this table, this lamp, and the 2 charcoal faces at the top of the dossier. The twin Alpha Kings. King Damien, composed, eyes that suggested survival where others hadn't. King Eli, the same architecture of power, but something different in the set of his mouth. In another life, it might have been called warmth. She would not call it that. Lyra traced the guard rotation lines and heard Elder Marin's voice from that morning's briefing moving through her mind like smoke. 40 seconds of full exposure. You will not get a better window in your lifetime. She had nodded then, felt the familiar cold clarity settle into her chest. The terrible stillness she had been trained to cultivate since age 7, when Marin first placed a blade in her hand and told her stillness separated hunters who survived from hunters who didn't. She had been still ever since. The door opened behind her and the air shifted. She didn't turn. She knew Callum's footsteps the way she knew her own pulse. He crossed the room and sat opposite her without speaking. Let someone else take this one. The words landed exactly where she expected them to. She had been building a wall against them all afternoon. There is no one else. I know. A pause. The lamp flickered. I just wish you didn't have to. She looked up then. Callum was watching her with that expression she had never named. Not quite fear, not quite love, but heavy with both. He was the only person who looked at her as though her capability and her fragility could exist in the same body without contradiction. He reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. He wasn't stopping her. He wasn't pleading. He was simply there. She let it stay for 3 seconds. Then she withdrew and returned to the maps. He left an hour later. The room felt altered in his absence, and she refused to examine why. Marin's morning briefing had filled the main hall to capacity. Hunters, council members, and northern delegates, all present to witness what he called the Order's most significant operation in a generation. He spoke of massacres, of werewolf supremacy, of generations waiting for justice. His fury was polished enough to resemble righteousness. He spoke of a hunter prepared since childhood. No one needed her name. A young recruit raised a question about documentation directly linking the Kings to massacre orders. The evidence, Marin replied evenly, is preserved in the archives. You will be briefed when your role requires it. The boy sat. Lyra watched Marin's hands. He always spoke with them. During that answer, they remained perfectly still. She stored the detail away. The night before departure, she sat on the compound wall, a rare indulgence without weapon or perimeter calculation. The sky shifted into that deep blue that had no adequate name. For 23 minutes, she allowed herself to think about nothing. Callum found her. He climbed up beside her without asking. They watched the dark gather between treetops. Come back, he said quietly. I will. He didn't argue, but something in the set of his shoulders told her he understood that survival and sameness were not the same thing. She should have asked him what he meant. She didn't. When the sky went fully black, she climbed down and went inside to finish packing. He remained on the wall long after she disappeared into the compound. She did not look back. She crossed the threshold before dawn, disguised as a trade diplomat, documented as a woman who did not exist. Weapons that left no werewolf signature. A dossier memorized well enough to burn. The last thing she saw before the gates closed was Marin standing at the top of the steps. His hands were at his sides. Still. She had been trained to walk into enemy territory without fear. What no one had prepared her for was the possibility that the most dangerous thing she would encounter there was the truth. Or the other thing. The presence that had lived inside her since birth, patient as stone, waiting for a full moon, a crowded festival square, and the eyes of two kings to fracture 23 years of disciplined silence. She was walking toward it now, and somewhere deep within her, in a place she had never been permitted to explore, something ancient and silver was already beginning to wake. She smelled it before she saw it. The cedar smoke and something sweet beneath it. Night-blooming flowers that only opened in darkness, the kind that made the air feel alive. Then came the music. Not market noise, not training yard clang. Real music. String and wind entwined, climbing high and holding there, pulsing. Lyra kept her face neutral. She had studied the lunar festival for 8 months. Diagrams, guard rotations, political seating charts. She had memorized sightlines and exit routes. The documents called it the realm's most elaborate celebration. They had not prepared her for this. The city unfolded through the eastern trade gate in silver light and living motion. Ancient stone towers draped in lanterns. Thousands moving in an unhurried current. Vendors weaving. Children darting. Wolves laughing. Not monstrous. Not feral. Alive. She stepped into the current and became no one. A merchant's papers, a borrowed accent, a name practiced until it carried no friction. 3 hidden weapons loaded with wolfsbane compounds that worked in silence. 10 minutes to map the grounds. She used everyone. The crescent-shaped festival center anchored at the ceremonial platform. Elevated white stone visible from everywhere, lit by 4 braziers that would burn until dawn. Midnight. 40 seconds. That was her window. She located her balcony, confirmed guard rotations, identified 3 exit routes. She was ready. The crowd brushed against her in small, careless ways, a child colliding with her knee, a woman's hand catching her arm mid-laughter. Harmless contact. Her body reacted anyway, untrained for touch that wasn't tactical. At quarter to midnight, now the moon cleared the Capitol Tower. The shift was collective. Heads turned, music altered, silence descended. Lyra climbed the trading house stairs and took her position at the balcony rail. King Damien appeared first. He ascended with deliberate stillness, and something moved through the crowd. Not fear. Something closer to reverence. The dossier had promised brutality. The man below her looked like someone carrying something heavy without complaint. She aligned her sight. The cold clarity did not settle. Pressure built behind her sternum. Not pain. A turning. King Eli stepped onto the platform. Where Damien was contained gravity, Eli was contained fire. Same power. Different current. He leaned toward his brother briefly, and the crowd responded like iron to a magnet. 40 seconds. Wind. Distance. Angle. Her hands were steady. Damien turned his head. Not searching. Pulled. His gaze moved across the crowd and locked onto hers. Across smoke and lantern light and distance, the connection struck. Immediate and absolute. Something inside her opened. Not fractured. Unlocked. She stumbled, gripping the balcony rail. Her mind scrambled for logic. Pheromone manipulation, documented disorientation tactics. Explanations she could catalog and defeat. Eli looked up. The second gaze did not echo the first. It ignited it. The impact stole her breath. The world compressed. The bond, she did not yet know the word, flooded her chest. Old and immense and certain. On the platform, both kings had gone still. Damien's composure flickered before he contained it. Eli didn't try. A guard leaned toward Eli. Eli spoke. "Bring her to us." The words reached her as if distance had surrendered. Her hands slipped from the rail. Instinct returned in a surge, exposed, compromised move. She descended the stairs. Halfway down, she heard Damien's voice. Quiet, precise. He said her name, her real name, the one no one had ever spoken. She froze at the bottom step. He knew my name. Then she ran. Low, efficient, unpredictable. She dissolved into crowd density, cut through back roads, reached the neutral safe house in under 20 minutes. She locked the door and slid to the floor, hands pressed against her sternum. The bond remained. Distance had done nothing. It pulsed inside her like a second heartbeat. She sat there for a long time, festival music still threading through the night outside, her operational certainty in fragments. Dawn bled into the city. She rose and crossed to the window. The towers shifted from black to violet to pale silver. Silver. Her gaze dropped to the crescent-shaped mark on her inner wrist. The scar, Marin said, came from the night the hunters found her. In morning light, it did not resemble scar tissue. It was smooth, precise, moon-shaped. When the bond stirred, warmth spread beneath her thumb. She closed her hand over it, told herself she imagined it, told herself the mission was still intact, told herself she knew who she was. None of it felt as stable as it had 3 days ago. 3 nights from now, the full moon would peak. She didn't yet understand what that meant. What she knew was the sound of her name spoken by a stranger who should not have known it. What she knew was that a door sealed for 23 years now stood open, and what she was beginning, against every instinct she possessed, to suspect. Was that what waited beyond it was not an enemy? She just didn't know what it would cost to find out. The next 3 days moved like a slow death. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just the grinding, mechanical continuation of time in a body that had stopped agreeing with its own basic functions. Lyra stayed in the safe house because leaving felt impossible, and staying felt worse. And she existed in the suffocating middle space between those two facts with the particular exhaustion of someone fighting a war on every front simultaneously. During daylight hours, she worked. This was the only thing that felt familiar, the only territory her training still covered. She spread the mission documents across the table, maps, guard rotations, exit strategies, contingency plans for 17 different failure scenarios. And she analyzed what had gone wrong at the festival with the cold precision of an operative conducting an after-action review. She documented the bond's onset, cataloged the symptoms, physiological response, sensory distortion, involuntary motor disruption, cognitive impairment. She wrote it all down in the shorthand she and Callum had developed over 6 years of fieldwork, and she built a case against herself that looked, on paper, like science. Werewolf pheromone manipulation, advanced level, targeted disorientation tactic, known supernatural interference designed to compromise human operatives through manufactured emotional response. Conclusion: exposure limits must be reduced. Countermeasures must be implemented. Mission timeline requires adjustment. She read it back to herself 3 times. It sounded correct. It sounded like the kind of analysis that would satisfy Marin, that would get filed in the compound archives alongside 100 other documented encounters with werewolf psychological warfare. It sounded exactly like what she had been trained to produce when things went wrong in the field and explanations were required. It also sounded like a lie. She knew it was a lie because at night, when she finally allowed herself to stop working and the exhaustion pulled her down into something adjacent to sleep, the bond didn't feel like manipulation. It felt like memory, like a name she'd forgotten how to pronounce being whispered back to her in the dark, like coming home to a place she'd never been. She woke up every morning furious at herself for thinking that. The coded message from Callum arrived on the 2nd day. She heard the signal tap against the safe house's back window. 3 soft clicks, the pattern they used when standard communication channels were compromised or surveillance was likely. And she crossed the room to retrieve the small leather tube wedged into the window frame's exterior gap. Inside, a single strip of paper, Callum's handwriting, their private shorthand that would mean nothing to anyone who intercepted it. Mission status? Concerned. 4 words. She stared at them for a long time. In their shorthand, concerned had 3 levels of meaning depending on context, and she could hear exactly which level he meant. Not the professional concern of a partner tracking operational progress, not the tactical concern about enemy movement or exposure risk. The third kind, the personal kind, the kind that meant, I can feel that something is wrong from here and I'm frightened and I need you to tell me you're still you. Her response took her an hour to compose. She went through 7 versions before settling on the one that revealed nothing while also not being an outright lie, because lying to Callum had always been harder than lying to anyone else, and she had never been entirely sure why. Situation complex. Continuing reconnaissance. She sent it back through the dead drop system they'd established on her second day in the capital. Then she sat at the table and waited for the reply she knew was coming. It arrived 4 hours later. 1 word, no shorthand, just her name in his handwriting. Lyra. She closed her eyes. She knew what it meant. The way he wrote it, the fact that he'd dropped the operational coding entirely, the specific weight he could put into her name even through written text. It all translated to the same thing. I see you. I'm frightened. Come back. She put the message in the lamp flame and watched it burn. Then she went back to the table and the maps and the mission analysis that was definitely, absolutely, completely going to explain what had happened in a way that made sense and allowed her to continue being the person she had spent 23 years becoming. The bond pulsed in her chest. Steady, patient, entirely unimpressed with her efforts. She pressed both hands flat against her sternum and told it to stop. It didn't stop. On the 3rd day, her body started doing things that training couldn't account for. Small things at first. She woke up and the safe house smelled different. Not bad different, just more. Like someone had turned up the volume on every scent until she could identify individual components she'd never noticed before. The wood of the table, the tallow in the lamp, the stone dust in the walls, the residual smell of whoever had stayed in this safe house before her, their anxiety a sharp metallic note under everything else. She told herself it was stress affecting her perception. Then her hearing sharpened. She was reviewing surveillance notes when she heard the conversation happening in the building across the alley. Heard it clearly, heard every word, heard the emotional undercurrent beneath the words. 2 merchants arguing about a delayed shipment, one of them lying about the delay, the other one knowing he was lying and choosing not to call it out. She could hear the lie. Not because of the words themselves, but because of something in the speaker's voice, some frequency her ears had never been able to catch before, and now couldn't ignore. She went to the window and looked out. The building across the alley was 40 feet away. Stone walls, closed shutters. There was no possible way she should be hearing that conversation. She was hearing it anyway. The food stopped working next. She had 3 days of hunter rations in the safe house supplies. Dried meat, hard bread, the dense nutritional compounds designed to keep operatives functional on minimal intake. She'd been eating them for years. They'd always been fine. Not good. Not meant to be good. Just fuel. On the 3rd morning, she tried to eat and her body rejected it before she'd finished the first bite. Not sickness, exactly. Just a bone-deep wrongness. Her system informing her with absolute clarity that whatever she'd just put in her mouth was no longer food her body recognized as edible. She tried again at midday. Same result. By evening, she was hungry in a way she'd never experienced. Not the normal empty stomach sensation of someone who'd missed meals, but something older and more demanding. Something that wanted meat and wanted it raw and was getting increasingly difficult to ignore. She did not examine that thought closely. She did not let herself think about what it might mean. She sat at the table with her operational analysis and her maps and her carefully constructed explanations, and she did not acknowledge that the architecture of her body was changing underneath her. that doors were opening in her blood that had been locked since birth, that something ancient and patient and entirely certain of itself was waking up and preparing to break the surface. The full moon rose at 8:47. She wasn't tracking it. She had been deliberately not tracking it, had been refusing to look at the lunar calendar in her mission documents, had been pretending that the slow building pressure in her chest over the past 3 days was stress or exhaustion or the lingering effects of whatever the bond had done to her nervous system at the festival. She felt it rise anyway, and the second the moon cleared the horizon, she didn't need to see it happen, didn't need to be near a window. She felt it in her body like a string being pulled taut from the inside. The pressure that had been building went from uncomfortable to unbearable in the span of a single breath. She stood up from the table. The movement was involuntary. Her body simply decided it was standing now, made the decision without consulting her, and she was on her feet and moving toward the door before her conscious mind registered what was happening. She needed to be outside. She needed to be outside right now, immediately, with an urgency that bypassed every piece of training she'd ever received about staying hidden and maintaining cover and never exposing yourself unnecessarily in hostile territory. None of that mattered. The moon was pulling and her body was answering, and the safe house had suddenly become a cage she needed to be free of before something inside her started breaking things to get out. She made it to the city's edge in 15 minutes. She didn't remember the route. Didn't remember unlocking the door or navigating the streets or passing whatever late evening citizens were still out in the capital's outer districts. She remembered the moon, could feel it through the buildings like a physical presence, tracking its position without seeing it. Her body oriented toward it the way a compass orients to magnetic north. The hills started a quarter-mile beyond the city walls. Rocky, sparse with vegetation, and the kind of terrain hunters used for endurance training because it was unforgiving and exposed and didn't let you hide from your own limitations. She climbed. Her legs moved without fatigue. That should have been impossible. She'd eaten almost nothing in 3 days, had barely slept. Her body should have been running on empty. Instead, she felt strong in a way that was completely unfamiliar. Her muscles responding with an efficiency that made the climb feel effortless, and that wrongness scared her almost as much as the pressure building in her chest. She made it to the hilltop at 9:32. The moon was fully visible from here, hanging enormous and silver over the capital below, and the second she saw it, looked directly at it without walls or roofing in the way, the pressure inside her chest went from unbearable to critical. Heat flooded through her core. Not fever heat, not the warmth of exertion. This was something else entirely, spreading from the center of her chest outward through her limbs with the systematic thoroughness of something that had waited a very long time for permission to move and was now refusing to wait any longer. She gasped, and the gasp came out wrong. Too much air? Too loud. Her lungs suddenly operating at a capacity they'd never had before. Then the pain started. It began in her hands. A pressure under the skin, under the bones, something trying to push outward with increasing force. She looked down and watched her fingers begin to elongate. Watched the joints shift positions that should have been anatomically impossible, and she tried to scream and couldn't because her jaw was already changing, already restructuring, the bones of her face moving under her skin like tectonic plates. She dropped to her knees in the frost-hard grass. The transformation was not gradual. Every training document she'd read about werewolf physiology had described the shift as a smooth transition, practiced wolves moving between forms with practiced ease. This was not that. This was brutal. This was her body coming apart and rebuilding itself through sheer force, breaking bones and regrowing them in new configurations, tearing muscle to make room for more muscle, every nerve ending lighting up simultaneously to inform her in excruciating detail of exactly what was being destroyed and remade. She screamed, and the scream broke halfway through and became something else. Her spine arched, vertebrae cracked and reformed. Her legs bent backward at the knee and her feet elongated, and she fell forward onto hands that were no longer hands, that had become something with claws and silver fur, and a strength she could feel humming in them like contained lightning. Her vision fractured. Color drained away. Motion sharpened. Depth expanded. The world remade itself into something older. Not worse, not diminished, but different in ways she had no human vocabulary for. She could smell everything. The frost on the grass, each individual blade releasing its particular scent. The city below, all its component parts. The wolves in the capital, their collective presence a warm pressure on her awareness. And further out, miles further but impossibly clear, two distinct scents that her body recognized before her mind could catch up. King's, mates, hers. The final change took her voice. Her throat restructured. The scream became a howl, not chosen, not controlled, just ripped out of her by the transformation's completion. And it climbed into the night air with a power that made the hilltop grass flatten away from her. Not loud the way human loud was measured. Something else. Something that every wolf in hearing range would feel in their bones before their ears registered the sound. And then it was over. She stood on the hilltop in a body that was hers and not hers, breathing in great heaving gulps of night air that tasted like metal and frost and growing things, and she looked down at her hands. Paws. Silver-furred paws with black claws. Enormous and powerful and utterly alien. She took 3 steps forward and nearly fell because the legs didn't move the way human legs moved, didn't balance the way her body had balanced for 23 years. She caught herself. Tried again. The wolf body responded with instincts she didn't know she possessed. Weight distribution, paw placement, the particular rhythm of 4-legged movement that felt simultaneously foreign and like something she'd always known. She walked to the water pool at the hill's edge. The pool was small, barely 10 feet across, fed by a spring that had been running for 1,000 years and would run for 1,000 more. The moon reflected on its surface. She looked down. The wolf looking back was massive. Bigger than any wolf she'd seen in hunter documentation. Bigger than seemed possible for a creature that had been human-sized less than an hour ago. The fur was silver. Not gray, not white. Silver the way moonlight was silver, luminous in the dark. And the eyes. The eyes were blue. Not the pale blue of Northern Territory wolves. Deep blue, burning blue, the color of the hottest part of a flame before it goes white. Ember and ice at the same time. She stared at her own reflection and something in her chest that had been wound tight for 23 years finally, quietly, released. This was what she was. Not human. Never human. Whatever the hunters had told her, whatever story they'd constructed about who she was and where she'd come from, and what the night of the massacre had made her. All of it was wrong. She was this. Had always been this. And the moon goddess? For reasons Lyra still didn't understand, had hidden it so deeply that not even she had known what was sleeping in her blood. Until now. She stayed in wolf form for an hour, just breathing. Just existing in a body that felt, for the first time in her entire remembered life, like it was actually built to contain her. She walked the hilltop perimeter, tested her new strength against the large rocks scattered across the summit, moving them with an ease that should have been impossible. Listened to the night with ears that could separate individual sounds from miles away. Smelled the capital and the forest and the world below with a precision that made her previous human senses feel like she'd been living her whole life with a cloth over her face. She felt powerful. She felt right. She felt absolutely terrified. Because if this was what she was, if the silver wolf was the truth and everything else was the lie, then the hunters who raised her were wrong about her. And if they were wrong about her, they might be wrong about other things. Important things. Things like who killed her parents and why she'd been found alone at the tree line and what the twin alpha kings actually were beneath the propaganda. She was still wrestling with that thought when she smelled them. 2 distinct scents on the wind, approaching from the capital's direction. warm and old and carrying the particular weight of power that didn't need to announce itself. Her wolf instincts identified them before her human mind finished processing, recognized them with the same absolute certainty that had pulled her to this hilltop in the first place. The kings were coming. And the bond, which had been humming steady in her chest since the festival, suddenly doubled in intensity. They emerged from the tree line at the hill's base and stopped. Both of them. Just stopped, completely still, 20 feet away, and looked up at where she stood at the summit. She could see their faces clearly. Wolf vision made the moonlit dark almost as bright as day. And what she saw in their expressions was complicated enough that she didn't have names for all the pieces. Recognition, relief, grief. Something that looked like awe. Damien spoke first. His voice was quiet but carried perfectly in the still night air. "We've been looking for you for 6 years. We thought you were dead." The words hit her like a physical impact. 6 years. They'd been looking for her. The prophecy everyone kept not quite mentioning in the intelligence reports. The thing the Hunter documents referred to obliquely as a werewolf political myth. They'd been looking for that prophecy's fulfillment, and it had been her all along, alive and breathing and training to kill them in a compound full of people who had every reason to keep her hidden. Eli said nothing, but his face did something complicated, and he lowered himself to the ground in a single fluid movement, sitting in the frost-hard grass with his hands open and visible, and his entire posture communicating the opposite of threat. Damien followed. Both of them sitting on the cold ground, not approaching, not demanding, just waiting. Making themselves small, which should have been impossible for two apex predators, two kings, but they did it anyway. It happened at the festival in careful clinical terms that made it all sound manageable. She looked at them for a long time. Then she swept everything off the table in a single violent motion and watched the papers scatter across the floor like the lies they were. She was a silver wolf. She was prophesied. She was the mate of the twin alpha kings. And someone who had raised her, who had loved her, who had taught her everything she knew about who she was, had lied to her about all of it. The question wasn't what she was anymore. The question was, who had tried so hard to make sure she never found out? And the second question, the one that was going to cost her everything to answer. Why? She sat at the table until sunrise, not thinking in straight lines, just existing inside the wreckage of everything she had believed about herself, while the bond in her chest pulled steadily toward the hilltop where two kings were likely still waiting. She wasn't going back. Not yet. The Hunter compound was 3 days' hard ride from the capital. Callum would be watching for her return. Marin would expect a debrief. She had exactly that long to decide how to walk back into a life that no longer fit her. She left at dawn. The journey was mechanical. Neutral stable horse, standard travel papers, reverse route, faster pace. On the second day, when the horse began to tire, irritation flashed, sharp and instinctive. I could run this distance faster in wolf form. She shut the thought down immediately. She was not thinking about silver fur, not about ember blue eyes, not about how right her body had felt beneath the moon. She was thinking about answers. The bond disagreed. It pulled harder with every mile she put between herself and the capital. By the third day, the ache in her chest made each breath feel deliberate. She arrived mid-afternoon. Callum was already there, leaning against the exterior wall, arms crossed, pretending at casual, failing. He straightened when he saw her. He didn't ask questions. That had always been one of his strengths, knowing when questions were pressure. He opened his arms. She stepped into them. His embrace was warm, solid, familiar in a way that didn't demand anything from her. She pressed her face against his shoulder and let herself pretend, just for a moment, that nothing had changed. The bond pulsed. Hard. Reality returned. She pulled back. "You okay?" he asked. Tired. He studied her face carefully. What happened out there? Mission got complicated. I'll debrief with Marin. That's not what I meant. She looked at him fully then. Concern, fear, and something else. A grief that seemed premature. I'm working through something, she said. I need time. He held her gaze, then nodded. Whatever it is, you're not alone. I'm here. I've always been here. She knew. That was the problem. Nothing had changed in the compound, and yet everything had. Her senses were sharper now. The compound smelled different. Fear, not panic, something older and chronic. A tension soaked into stone and wood and skin. She could hear arguments 3 buildings over, papers shifting in Marin's office across the yard, laughter that didn't reach the throat. Her body wanted to shift. The wolf pressed against her skin constantly now, not violent, just insistent. She forced herself human. Her first meal was torture. She lasted 2 bites. Her body rejected the rations instinctively. She chewed anyway. Callum noticed. She swallowed through wrongness and told herself control was still possible. By the 3rd day back, she knew it wasn't. The delayed debrief unsettled her more than it should have. Marin never delayed. When she entered his office, he stood at the window. Close the door. She did. Tell me what happened. She delivered the operational version. Clean, verifiable, empty of truth. When she finished, he was quiet. The targets identified you. How? Unknown. Possible intelligence breach. You observed no unusual activity? Define unusual. A flicker crossed his face. Prophecy-related movement. Supernatural phenomena. So he knew. He had always known. Nothing unusual, she said evenly, his hands clasped behind his back. You're dismissed. She reached the door. Lyra. She stopped. You're valuable to this order. I'd hate to lose you to something preventable. It sounded like concern. It felt like threat. She went straight to the Western Tower archives. Vess nodded once as Lyra passed. The massacre file was exactly where it should be. Marin's handwriting. 23 years ago. Werewolf aggression. Pack-based assault. Sole survivor located at treeline. Her. No named alpha authority. No definitive command attribution. Just assumption structured as fact. She searched deeper. Border conflicts. Intelligence briefings. Alpha reports. Pattern. Specificity removed. Attribution blurred. Clean logic. Werewolves attacked. The kings command werewolves. Therefore the kings were responsible. Elegant. Incomplete. He found her near midnight. Didn't interrupt. Just waited. Did you know? She asked. Silence answered. 2 years, he said quietly. My father's notes didn't match the official report. And you didn't tell me. I was protecting you. From the truth? From what it would cost you. He stepped closer. I love you, he said. Whatever happened in the capital, it doesn't change that. The bond pulsed so sharply she gasped. His eyes widened. Are you hurt? I'm fine. Lie. He took her hand. Warm, human, steady. I'll stand with you, he said. If you tear this place down, I'll help you. It was the most honest thing anyone had ever offered her. And it was impossible. Because the version of her he loved, the fully human one, no longer existed. I need time. How much? I don't know. He searched her face. Is there someone else? Silence betrayed her. Understanding dawned. Not the full truth, but enough. I'll give you space, he said. He left. She stood alone in the archives. The bond pulled toward the capital like a rope tied to her ribs. Stay, and shrink herself into something smaller. Go, and lose everything familiar. The wolf knew which choice to make. The human part of her hesitated. She returned the files with careful precision. Vess glanced up. "Find what you were looking for?" "No," Lyra said, "but I found what I needed." The yard was quiet. The moon hung 3/4 full. 7 days. 7 days before she would not be able to suppress the shift. 7 days to uncover the truth. 7 days before choice became inevitable. The wolf stirred. Soon. The question wasn't whether she would go home. It was which home she would claim. Deep down, in the place that had woken on that hilltop and refused to sleep again. She already knew. And it was going to cost her everything. The visitor arrived at dawn on the 4th day. Lyra was in the training yard running blade drills, trying to exhaust the wolf pressing against her skin, when the perimeter alarm sounded. One long bell tone. Unexpected arrival. She stopped mid-movement. Every hunter did the same. The gate master appeared at the tower edge and called down to Elder Marin, who had been observing drills from the covered platform. "Alone? You're certain?" A pause. Then Marin descended and walked toward the gate with controlled precision. 3 senior hunters followed. Lyra wasn't one of them, but her hearing was sharper than anyone's now. She heard the gates open. "This is hunter territory. State your purpose." A steady, elderly voice answered. "My name is Sarah. I'm a record keeper from the werewolf realm. I'm here to speak with the woman you call Lyra. I have information about the night her parents were killed. Information hidden for 23 years. I'm done keeping it." Weapons lifted across the yard. Defensive lines formed. Lyra was already moving. She pushed through the gathering crowd and reached the front just as Marin began to refuse. "I'm Lyra," she called. Marin's expression tightened. Anger, calculation, something like fear. The woman outside the gate was small and old. White hair braided simply, worn but clean clothes. A leather satchel held carefully against her chest. Their eyes met. Sarah smiled. I sad and relieved. "You look like your mother. I was there the night the moon goddess marked your wrist. I've been looking for you ever since." The bond in Lyra's chest pulsed. Recognition. Safety. Marin stepped between them. "This compound doesn't grant entry to werewolves. Leave whatever you've brought and— No." The word came sharp, commanding. "She stays. She talks to me." Silence fell heavy. "Lyra," Marin warned. "She's here because of my parents. Because of something I'm learning wasn't what I was told. She comes in, or I go out." He calculated. Control 1. "Fine. Escorted. 1 hour." "In the archives," Lyra said. "Private." Another calculation. A nod. They walked together through the compound. The moment Lyra took Sarah's hand, something inside her settled. The same rightness she'd felt with the Kings. In the archives, Vess took one look at the scene and quietly left. Sarah set the satchel on the table. "I was record keeper to the royal court for 40 years. I recorded your blessing. I recorded your birth." "Why are you here?" Lyra asked. "Because I'm old and tired of watching you live a lie." She opened the satchel. "Your parents weren't killed by the twin Alpha Kings. They were killed by a faction of werewolf nobles who feared the prophecy you represented, and hunters who wanted peace silenced." Documents spread across the table. Letters, correspondence, official seals. "Your parents were diplomats," Sarah said. "They were close to brokering shared territory. Certain people couldn't allow that." Lyra picked up a report written in hopeful handwriting. A future described where bloodshed wasn't inevitable. Sarah slid another letter forward. "Lord Theron and a hunter identified as M, 2 weeks before the massacre." Lyra read the coded language. Threat neutralized. Situation resolved. The handwriting was familiar. "Marin?" she said. Sarah nodded. He coordinated with them. After the massacre, he found you. Found me where? At the tree line near this compound. The moon goddess hid you there, masked your wolf nature so deeply you wouldn't shift. If you'd stayed in the realm, you would have been killed. The wolf inside her snarled, not at Sarah, at the walls around them. Why now? Lyra asked. Because I needed proof strong enough for you to believe. And 3 weeks ago, the prophecy awakened. I felt it. The festival. The bond. The kings, Lyra said quietly. They commissioned the prophecy. They've mourned you for 23 years. When the bond flared at the festival, the entire court felt it. The archive door burst open. Callum stood there. Your hour's up. But he wasn't looking at Sarah. Is it true? He asked. Your father responded to the massacre, Sarah said gently. He wasn't part of it. His notes are here. She handed him a smaller folder. Callum read, his face drained of color. He tried to tell me, he whispered. I thought he was losing his mind. He looked at Lyra, grief unguarded. I let you believe it because I was afraid to question the order. Lyra stepped into him. They held each other while 23 years of lies finished collapsing. Then she pulled back. I need to confront Marin. I know. And then I need to leave. His face tightened, pain and acceptance warring. You were never human, he said softly. I've known something changed. I just didn't want to see it. Silence confirmed what he already knew. The kings, he said. They're your mates. The bond pulsed hard in her chest. He saw. Right. He stepped back. Go, don't stay here trying to be what you're not. I need you happy. He left. Sarah watched him go. He has a good heart. I know. But he isn't your mate. I know that too. Lyra gathered the documents. Thank you, she said. Your pack, Sarah replied. Lyra left the archives and went straight to Marin's office. She didn't knock. The satchel hit his desk hard. He looked at it, then at her. So she found you, he said. She brought proof. She slid the correspondence toward him. He read, then met her gaze. I did what was necessary. Your parents were about to weaken Hunter defenses. They were diplomats. They were werewolves. So am I. Silence detonated. He studied her, really saw her. How long? Since the full moon. The prophecy, he muttered. We searched for you after the massacre. When you appeared human, I thought we'd won. Thought the moon goddess had failed. You raised me to kill my own mates. I raised you to protect humanity. You raised me on a lie. I loved you, he said firmly. I kept you alive. The wolf in her wanted blood. The human part wanted to cry. She did neither. If you leave, he said as she turned, you betray everything you were raised to be. Good, she replied, because everything I was raised to be was built on a lie. She walked across the compound yard. Hunters watched, whispering. Callum waited at the gate with a pack. The device has a secure frequency, he said. You call? I answer. She memorized his face. I loved you, she said. Just not the way you needed. I know. Go find your mates, he added quietly. And if they don't treat you right, I don't care if they're kings. She laughed through the ache. She hugged him once, hard, then stepped through the gates before she could falter. The forest opened around her. She shifted mid-stride. The silver wolf ran free, powerful, unrestrained, done pretending. She reached neutral territory by nightfall, found the trade post Sarah mentioned, wrote carefully. I have the documentation. I need to talk. Come to neutral territory. Come alone. She sent it. Then she waited beneath a moon 5 days from full. They arrived 2 hours after sunset. Damien and Eli walked into the clearing alone, their guards holding back. The bond roared, no longer patient, no longer restrained. Lyra's prophecy had never promised easy, only real. And real was enough. If you've walked this journey from the first chapter to this moment, you are part of Moonshadow Tales. And if you are new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It will help this channel grow. Join the pack. I'll see you next week.